Let's talk Utah Jazz basketball on the Monty Show. I don't know. I'm just being sarcastic as usual. But over the weekend, we were following the Jazz situation very closely here on the Monty Show. And very clearly, the Utah Jazz, Jake, continue to work behind the scenes to add a big man. That is clearly their priority, if you will. Very, very much, in my opinion, as it should be, because this team, with the trade of Rudy Gobert, got a lot smaller in the middle. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You have to find a way to backstock that. But Jake, right now, if I had to ask you, if I had to pin you down right now, would you say the Jazz are rebuilding or are the Utah Jazz retooling?
Yeah, my opinion is that they're retooling. I think that their behavior and their actions have told us this, and that what I'm referencing is the way they've gone about this process. You know, they took their time finding Will Hardy, the next head coach of the Utah Jazz. Obviously, you know, they've taken their time in trading Rudy Gobert, you know, from this team, obviously, to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I feel like that deal was very beneficial for the Utah Jazz. I feel like they got a haul of picks, good players that they can then flip, and a couple that I would recommend that they keep. But I think the reason they're retooling instead of rebuilding is because if you were going to enter a full rebuild, you would have traded Donovan Mitchell. You would be trying to move on from him. You would be trying to change and redefine this entire organization. And I don't think that's what's happening here. I think if you've watched this team for the last 2 years, you know that this team went through some struggles in the locker room this past season. You know that it's been a fight for Donovan Mitchell to really get to the level that we all expect him to get to. There have been some injuries and some things have gotten in the way. And so I think, you know, when we try to define retool or rebuild, I just think a rebuild is just not what we're seeing, because a rebuild would be tearing the whole thing down, shipping everybody out, trying to be the Oklahoma City Thunder as an example, or the Orlando Magic, where you're trying to get to that top, 3 in the NBA draft. And that's not what the Utah Jazz have done here. But I think what they have done is they've said, all right, the team that we have was good. It was, competent to a certain level, but we haven't been able to get to the Western Conference Finals. We haven't been able to, contend at the level we want to contend at. So how do we change that? Where does that process start? Well, that process started with trading Rudy Gobert. So now that that's done, now the information we have is that they are involved in the Kevin Durant situation as a third team to sort of facilitate Brooklyn and Phoenix doing a deal. So that's why I say this isn't a full-on tear it down, burn it down rebuild. This, to me, is a retool where you're just reshaping the team around your best player in Donovan Mitchell, and you're hoping and, not really hoping, counting on the fact that Donovan Mitchell comes back as a complete player, and the guys you put around him enable him to be in positions to carry your team in the biggest moments.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is very clear is that the Utah Jazz are chasing Deandre Ayton and John Collins. Sources last night around the NBA, told me that the Jazz were very close on a John Collins trade with the Atlanta Hawks before this Kevin Durant thing jumped off last week. And John Collins obviously is a guy that's a good fit, but I think the question you have to ask yourself is Deandre Ayton a better fit, or is John Collins a better fit? And I'm here to tell you it's Deandre Ayton, and I don't know that it's close. Deandre Ayton brings you size at 6'11". He brings you an offensive skill set that is superior to what you had with Rudy Gobert or what John Collins brings you. Now, are you getting the defender that John Collins is? Certainly not. But I think what Deandre Ayton lacks defensively, you can make up for with his offensive production. And I would tell you that what the Jazz need is a big who can shoot a jump shot. And there is no doubt in my mind that Deandre Ayton fills that bill. I do wish DeAndre was meaner. I wish he was tougher. I wish he wanted to end dudes, but he doesn't. But DeAndre Ayton's a guy that can give you 20 and 10, 20 and 12 on a night in, night out basis, and he can do that in multiple ways. He can play at 3 different levels, Jake. I love DeAndre Ayton, and that's the guy that I would choose. If I were the Utah Jazz, I'd take DeAndre Ayton over John Collins.
Yeah, and I think you can't teach size, and that's the only thing to me that he really definitively has over John Collins. I think that their games are just completely different, meaning that John Collins, to me, is a more explosive player. He's somebody that you will find posterizing guys multiple times a season. He does have a three-point shot in his bag, but he doesn't have that polished mid-range elbow jumper that Deandre Ayton has that enables you to really get layered in the pick and roll game, meaning that it gives Don options essentially based on what the defense is running, whether to give it to Deandre Ayton to knock down the elbow or to take it to the hole, and that's what I think ultimately this retool needs to be defined as. Like, if you're a Utah Jazz fan and you're sitting here saying, okay, what is this team trying to do? Because they just traded away one of our best players that we had last season. Maybe I don't know the guys that we got back from Minnesota. So what really are we trying to do? And I would tell you what the Utah Jazz are trying to do is put Donovan Mitchell in positions to be successful by bringing in guys that give him space and give him options to operate, which is what he didn't have the last couple of seasons. So when I look at Ayton and I look at Collins, I would agree that Ayton probably is the better fit. He has the size. He trends a little bit more traditional big man without being, lumbering and limited from a speed standpoint. And I just think that Deandre Ayton can do a lot for you. That said, if they went and got John Collins, I would not be sitting here criticizing that move because I think John Collins is incredibly capable within his game. So I wouldn't criticize that at all.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, John Collins or Deandre Ayton are both going to be upgrades for you. But I think when you look at what you have to do here to compete, I think Deandre Ayton certainly makes that happen. But of course, and again, the question is, are the Utah Jazz trading Donovan Mitchell? And I think this is the number one question that we keep hearing. And it's mainly because you have people in Phoenix and Brooklyn talking about how the Nets are trying to get Donovan Mitchell to team him with Ben Simmons. And I would again say that by rule is not allowed in the NBA because you can't have two rookie contracts that have been extended. So when you look at the max deal that Ben Simmons is on, they traded for him. So you could have two of your own rookies that you've given max extensions to or designated rookies on your roster,
right?
But you can't trade for two of them. And Ben Simmons obviously was acquired by trade by Brooklyn, and they would be acquiring Donovan Mitchell by trade to have that second one. Now, by some miracle, is there a scenario where you can see that the Brooklyn Nets offload Ben Simmons? I think that's awfully difficult to have Ben Simmons end up on the Phoenix Suns. I think that's asking an awful lot out of Phoenix. They want Kevin Durant.
Right.
Kevin Durant wants the Phoenix Suns. I think it's awfully difficult to go to the Utah Jazz and make the case that, hey, give us Donovan Mitchell, we'll give you Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons hasn't played in more than a calendar year. He's coming off of a significant back injury, and he is dealing with mental health issues that are unclear and undefined. So while it is possible, I don't see it at all likely that Ben Simmons and Donovan Mitchell end up on the Brooklyn Nets. And, oh, by the way, the Jazz, according to Utah Jazz sources, have turned down everybody who have called about Donovan Mitchell, from the Miami Heat to the Charlotte Hornets to the New York Knicks repeatedly. I mean, they have over a dozen calls now asking about the availability of Donovan Mitchell, and at every turn, the Utah Jazz have told teams Donovan Mitchell is not available. We are not trading him. Don is not asked to be traded, which I think is the only way that the Utah Jazz would even consider a Donovan Mitchell deal. At least that's what I've been told directly by people at the Jazz. So I would be really surprised if Donovan Mitchell was involved in this deal. I would not be surprised if the Utah Jazz were involved in a Kevin Durant trade. If they were a third team in a Kevin Durant trade where, hey, they would absorb DeAndre Ayton, they give up Mike Conley in a draft pick, or Bojan Bogdanovic and Mike Conley in a draft pick, or 2 draft picks to end up with DeAndre Ayton and another pick swap, whatever that might be. I absolutely could see that scenario, and I actually think that's likely. I do, however, think that this is 100% in control of the Brooklyn Nets, because the Brooklyn Nets, as we told you yesterday, according to NBA sources who told me directly, the Brooklyn Nets have trade packages that they could execute right now today.
Right.
They could trade Kevin Durant to Phoenix for a package that includes Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and multiple picks. This is why the onus is on the Phoenix Suns to get a DeAndre Ayton deal done so that they could acquire 2 more first-round picks, which I think is what it would take to get DeAndre Ayton out of Phoenix to Utah, because Phoenix needs more draft assets to execute a Kevin Durant trade. So I think it makes sense that the Jazz are involved in that deal. I do not think it makes sense that they would be sending Donovan Mitchell on to Brooklyn.
No, and I think that was the greatness of the Rudy Gobert trade. If you're the Utah Jazz, you picked up all of those first-round picks, and I think that is why I was so excited about the Rudy Gobert trade for the Utah Jazz, because I felt like, okay, yeah, you got some talent in return, but what you really did is you offloaded a bunch of money and you got a bunch of picks back that you can then go and get involved in another thing, which is what we told you when we did that, emergency show, right, when that trade went down. So that's why I say it doesn't make sense that the Utah Jazz are trading Donovan Mitchell to Brooklyn. What makes sense both by rule and just structure, what makes sense is that the Jazz have all these picks to offer. So why would you not ship those out? Because the Utah Jazz clearly need a big. They've got the picks. They've got the players that they can send. There's no reason that it doesn't work. And so I think I agree with you. The only thing holding this thing up is that the Brooklyn Nets are trying to get the absolute tippy top trade value for Kevin Durant, because I can't blame them. When's the next time you're going to get to trade Kevin Durant?
Well, you better hope never.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and I know I say this a lot, but how many times do you want to be in a situation where you're trying to trade a guy the caliber of Kevin Durant?
How many times do you want to be in a situation where you're trying to trade Donovan Mitchell? You don't want to be in that position.
You're not. How many times do you want to talk about rebuild versus reload? You don't.
Yeah.
Josh Martin sends us a $2 tip this morning. Josh, appreciate you very much. Asking any news on Ayton to Utah. Well, we just gave it to you. Appreciate that. What's up, my guy, Jeremy Bolton, saying they gave out another PS5. I want it. They said they were going to ship it to me today. Well, Jeremy.
Your games are...
Jeremy.
It's too early for your games, Jeremy.
Unless your name is Gabe Ledley, you didn't win a PS5.
Yeah.
Neville93, what's up with you? He says, good morning, lads. I didn't have a chance to hear the show yesterday. My bad. How dare you? How dare you?
Come on.
How dare you?
Got to be committed. It's every day.
Every day. Be committed. It's National Workaholic Day.
Yeah.
Get it done.
Come on.
Jake R. says, good morning. You guys still are killing it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Brandon Butler, what's up, my friend? Jerry Reinsdorf bought the Arlington Bears and put Jerry Krause in charge.
The Arlington Bears.
The Arlington Heights Chicago Bears.
Wow.
Don't get me started. Jordan Nelson, good morning. What is next move for the Jazz? Are we all just in wait-and-see game thanks to Katie and Kyrie? I think the NBA is in a wait-and-see mode.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
I think that Kevin Durant, again, this is just a lot of my opinion based on things I've been told. I can't see Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving getting traded in the same deal. I don't think that happens. And when I say in the same deal, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving to the Suns, because I truly believe Kevin Durant's going to end up in Phoenix. I can't see Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving ending up on the same team. I can see a 4-team deal. Hey, we're going to send Kyrie Irving to the Lakers. We're going to send Kevin Durant to the Suns. And we're going to send DeAndre Ayton to Utah and here and there. And I could see that. But the moving parts in that deal are just astronomical. The trade that I think makes more sense is, hey, isolated deals. DeAndre Ayton to Utah for draft picks and Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
I could see Kyrie to the Lakers for Westbrook, who they negotiate a buyout with. Westbrook becomes a free agent. I can see stuff like that happening. These 4 or 5 team deals that are being thrown around like they happen every day in the NBA.
Yeah.
How often do you see 4 or 5 team deals in the NBA?
Rarely.
Very rarely.
Yeah.
Very rarely.
Well, and I think if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you're trying to maximize every deal within the 5-team deal. Because again, like we were just saying, not to be repetitive, but how often are you going to get the chance to get? I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. How often are you going to get the chance to get 10 first-round picks out of this whole situation between Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and from all these different teams? Would anyone be surprised if they got 7 to 10 first-round picks out of this whole thing? I'm not even exaggerating, not joking.
I would not.
That's what we're talking about.
I mean, that's the level of deal we're talking about. These world of hoops says, big question, is Donovan Mitchell a number one option to primarily build around for championship aspirations? I'm
Great
not
question.
convinced. I don't think anybody knows the absolute answer there. What I see in Donovan Mitchell, D's world, and why I think that he is a number one option, he plays at 3 levels. He can play at the rim, he can play in the mid-range, and he certainly can shoot a 3. The biggest question is, what is Donovan Mitchell going to bring to training camp that we haven't seen in the past? Is he going to be a better, more capable, more willing defender? Because that's the major hurdle. Don can play in the mid-range already. He needs to refine that and grow that part of his game. But if Donovan Mitchell's not going to improve defensively, he's never going to reach his max potential. He's not. He is going to be a limited player, and the Jazz are eventually going to collapse under the weight of his inability to defend. My guess is that Donovan Mitchell realizes, oh my goodness, they traded Rudy Gobert. Now it's up to me. I think that's truly where Donovan Mitchell is. I think Don is at a tipping point where this franchise is now being built around him. He's got to produce.
Facts.
And the point is, Kevin Durant is a guy that's a number one option. He defends well. He clearly, I think he's the best offensive player in basketball. There's no doubt about that. Donovan Mitchell's not that guy. He, in my opinion, has the talent. He has the ability. He has the capability to be that guy, but he ain't that guy right now. And I think the reason he's not is because he's not a wanting and willing defender. Now, is that because the system said feed everything to Rudy? Could be. A lot of guys have said their number one defensive tool was, okay, let him go because Rudy's protecting the rim. Now that Rudy's gone, does that mean that Don becomes a better, more willing defender? I don't know. We'll find out.
Right.
But I know he can do it. It's not a question of can he do it. It is a question of will he do it?
Well, and I think the only other thing that I would be concerned about is the leadership side. You know, I think that's one of the bigger things here is that, hey, we moved on from Rudy Gobert. We're remaking this roster. That's going to require Donovan Mitchell to be a leader off the court, too, to make it all work. And so I think that also, not that I doubt that he can do it, but, you know, it's just one of those things where until someone does it, you don't know. But to answer your question directly, I do think he can be the best player on a championship team. I just think he needs more space to operate and better contributors.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alex Chacon says, good morning, fellas. Another day of waiting for the Ayton has been traded to the Utah Jazz. Woj mom. Exactly.
Yeah, man.
You know, good morning to Rudy Sanchez, Ryan Buckley. Good morning to you. 1 round left. Good morning, too. He says, Ayton comes to Utah. He will put up monster numbers. Him and Don have super duo potential. I agree.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. By the way, I think the free-flowing style that Deandre Ayton showed us in Phoenix also plays really well in Utah. Like, I think in the system that most of us believe Will Hardy is going to craft, they're going to play wide-open basketball.
Which they should, man.
Well, that's what the game dictates now.
Yeah.
This half-court, you know, sometimes play an offensive set, sometimes shoot a 3 isn't what's going to win you a championship. You have to be more free than that. You have to be, what's the word, whimsical. You have to be able to run, play in transition, play defense, and shoot the 3 ball.
In the flow of the game. Like, you have to, the way I always describe it is you have to play in the flow of the game within the structure of your team. Like obviously you have to know your limitations, as the old saying goes, right? Like, every man's got to know his limitations. Well, every starting 5 has to know their limitations and how to play within the flow of the game to have success.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that you have to understand that when you look at John Collins versus Deandre Ayton, that's why I say I think it's very clear that Deandre Ayton's the better option here. This is a trade where, you know, I feel like the Jazz have to get this done.
Yeah.
Danny's got to execute and get this Deandre Ayton deal done. If they're able to acquire Deandre Ayton, I mean, that is a huge jump into the timeline of winning a championship because right now you're retooling. If you trade Donovan Mitchell, which again, the Jazz have told me repeatedly, they're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to trade Donovan Mitchell, you're not retooling, you're rebuilding. If you trade for DeAndre Ayton to put him next to Donovan Mitchell, now you are retooled. And it's a huge difference in philosophy.
Yep.
John Collins is a guy that's a work in progress. I think DeAndre Ayton, his growth has to be on defense. You like what he does offensively because, again, he can shoot the spot-up jumper, the catch and shoot, the push jumper. He can dunk. He's a good rebounder. You need him to be better and more intense on defense. I think John Collins is a guy that's far less able offensively. I think he's a guy that's far more versatile defensively. I'll take Ayton every single day. I don't even know. Honest to goodness, I don't know that it's that close.
Well, and the NBA Finals experience. I mean, we can't forget that.
And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think the as much as the ending has been ugly for DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix, his exposure to Monty Williams, his exposure to CP3, his ability to describe and share what he felt in the finals, I think is significant. And one of the things I think this Utah Jazz team has really lacked is anybody that's ever been there and done what they're trying to do
Agreed.
now. And so you look at DeAndre Ayton, he didn't win, obviously, and he was a big reason they didn't win. But he and Will Hardy have both been there now.
Yes.
They both have that experience of that path, that pressure, what that weight feels like sitting on your chest when you're trying to win a championship. And to me, I think that is something that's been sorely lacking in this organization. So, yeah, I actually feel like this is a situation where DeAndre Ayton is the far better option.
Well, and if you get DeAndre Ayton, then I think we have to say, hey, like this, like if they do the Ayton deal and let's say they do nothing else, then I think the offseason's been an A+. Coaching hire, changing the roster. Like if you don't get Ayton and you do some smaller trades, then I think we're probably in like B-ish area, 80% of like what you could have done. So but I do think they're aggressively pursuing Ayton, no doubt.
Yep, I agree. Spencer Morgan, good morning, my friend. He says, all the action so far indicates rebuild. Really? To think they are retooling requires belief in trades and signings that have not yet happened between now and the start of the season. If you look at the roster and draft capital as it stands right now, it's a rebuild. Retool may be what's going on, but we need to see some evidence of it. That's exactly right.
You're right. I mean, if they just sit here, if they just sit on their hands and do nothing and just keep the picks, then yeah, I mean,
where they
agree.
are today.
Yeah, I mean, if you just sit where you are right now today, then yeah, I have to agree it is a rebuild. But I know, like I think we can say on this show, like with the information we have, I mean, I would feel confident saying it's like 99.9% done that more moves are coming. I just don't think that there's no point in doing the Minnesota Rudy deal in valuing getting all those picks back if you weren't going to do something with those. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a basketball perspective.
No, I agree. Josh Martin gives us a $5 tip. That's $7
Thank
today,
you.
man. Appreciate you. By the way, you can send us a tip as well if you like. You certainly don't have to. There's a $ below in the comment box. Just click on that. It'll allow you to execute. If we get Ayton, do you think we'll make more trades, upgrade at point guard? I think my guess is there's 2 more deals coming. I think there is one more blockbuster trade coming. I think, and then there are some sculpting deals coming. I mean, when you give yourself a significant haircut, it's not just a pull out the clipper, let's do this.
Yeah.
You got to style it. You got to pull out the
How much
groomer.
you want on top? How skin fade on the side?
Yeah, what are we doing? A 2 on the side or a 3?
Yeah.
You are what you are.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. But yeah, Josh, I don't think you're off base there. I do think you have to do more. I think Jared Butler becomes an incredibly important figure in this conversation.
Hey, Summer League starting tonight, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Is that tomorrow? Is
Today.
it tonight? Yeah, it's like
Today.
tonight. Yeah, so like watch if you have time or record it or whatever, watch the Summer League because he will get run in the Summer League.
Yeah. D's World of Hoops says, and also Spencer, why would Mitchell waste years in a product that's playing first round bound? It would be smart for both sides to part ways. Well, I think if you're completely tearing this thing down to rebuild it, you're probably trading Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
But again, I would go back to what our sources have told us almost from day one, which is that the Utah Jazz have told Donovan Mitchell, we will spare no expense. We will build around you. We will get talent here. We will have assets and resources here to bring us to a level where we can compete for a championship as soon as possible. And I think if you're the Jazz, right now what you've done is put yourself in a position to fulfill that promise you made to Donovan Mitchell, which is we're going to get assets here to give you a chance to compete. Because right now they're a first-round play-in team. That's where they are. They're a 7, 8, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. That's who they are by this roster. If you go and get a DeAndre Ayton, now you're 6 through 4, 5, 6 in the West. You change the point guard, you upgrade, you bring some signings. Now you can compete towards the top of this conference, and it didn't take you 5 years to do that. So my guess is they're going to make one more significant trade that I think, if you had to ask me right now, I would think it would be DeAndre Ayton. But a lot of that trade's going to depend on Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
I think that they'll make that deal. And then my guess is they'd like to hold on to Bojan Bogdanovic, and they'd like to upgrade their starting point guard. Because I think everybody in this organization agrees Don's better off the ball. When you have a true point guard that handles the ball, brings it up, that's why I could see a guy like a campaign being thrown into that Ayton deal. Like we talked about this the other day as well. I don't necessarily believe it just has to be DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're able to get the Torrey Craigs of the world, if you're able to take some role players and you're able to, to get a Joe Harris from Brooklyn in a 3-team deal, if you're able to land those kinds of assets, if you're in a 3-team deal with the Suns, the Nets, and the Jazz, I mean, both of those teams have pieces that you would want. I mean, certainly guys like Harris that you're hearing they want to move, Joe's going to come at a little bit of a price, but that's also one of the truly elite 3-point shooters in the Eastern Conference when he's healthy.
Yeah.
But you need pieces like that. You need
more quality. You
need to upgrade around the perimeter. And you need to build depth into this team because, again, the other thing you got to remember is, Hernan Gomez is gone, Pascal's gone, Forrest is gone. Those are 3 rotational players that you used heavily last year. So now what happens to Nickeil Alexander-Walker? What happens to Jared Butler? What happens to guys that they're going to bring in? Because this roster is going to look completely different. And again, the other guy that I always bring up that nobody's talking about is Rudy Gay. He has multiple years left on his contract. What are you doing with Rudy Gay? Because I think he's a guy that, while I don't think there's tremendous value there, I think there is value there. I think there is value there.
Absolutely.
BB says Donovan's going nowhere. We'll see about that. Lorenzo Miranda gives us a $5 tip. Is there a chance Conley stays? How much would we get back for him, and who would want him? Well, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. I think we were told Dallas was very interested in Mike Conley. I think that you looked at a situation before the Cantavius Caldwell-Pope trade to Denver. I know that Washington had a lot of interest in Mike Conley. Danny could have done a Cantavius Caldwell-Pope trade and chose to wait. Obviously, he was working on a bigger deal with Rudy Gobert, so now that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So I do think there's an appetite for Mike Conley out there, and it's going to be a team like the Lakers are going to have to make a deal, and they're going to need a point guard after they trade Russell Westbrook. Things like that, that's what facilitates a Mike Conley trade. What you get in return for him, that's a big question. I'm stunned that Brooklyn gave up a first-round pick for Royce O'Neal. Stunned. Are you getting a first-round pick for Mike Conley? Somehow I don't see that.
Yeah.
I don't see that. So the answer is I'm not really sure what his value is. I think I could see a first-round a second-round pick for Mike Conley. I can't believe somebody's giving you a first-round pick for him.
And if they keep him, I think you got to bring him off the bench at this point.
Yeah.
I think he's just not a starter anymore.
And I don't know that Mike wants that.
Yeah.
So I think both parties are better served by trading Mike, certainly.
Yeah.
Chris Okawa gives us a $10 tip. Good morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great show. Keep up the good work, guys. Appreciate you very much for that. Thank you. I just think it's one of those things where Mike Conley's an important part of that locker room. But I don't know that locker room chemistry thing is real right now. I think you're bringing in so much new talent and you're pulling out a guy like Rudy Gobert. The locker room dynamic's going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only guys that are really going to be around as far as like main contributors are going to be, guaranteed. I would feel comfortable saying that Jordan Clarkson is still going to be here. I mean, I think that he's too valuable to this club to ship him out, but I don't feel comfortable saying Bogey is still going to be here. I certainly don't feel comfortable saying Mike is still going to be here. I just think that there's too much value for those two guys, and I'm just telling you guys now, like, the Phoenix KD thing needs to play itself out so the Jazz know if they got that deal done, and then from there, you're, like you said, you're going to make your sculpting moves, and I think guys in those trades are Mike and Bogey, and you go from there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. I think it's one of those things where, you have a situation in, here where you have a lot of flexibility. I think you're in a situation where you've made a transformative deal for Rudy Gobert, and now you're in a place where now you're in the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this for a year and a half or 2 years now since they signed that Gobert contract, that the minute you move that off your books, you get a lot of leverage for that. And I think, again, the thing that really stands out to me is I see Danny Ainge here operating, and it's one of those things, folks, where I say to myself, my God, he's here operating.
It's a breath of fresh air, honestly.
It really is.
And I think your point about the locker room or like the team culture and chemistry not being here right now is spot on, because how could it be? I don't think that's an indictment on the team. I think it's part of the process. I think whether you subtract that many human beings out of a locker room,
like, what are you, 6 players off? I mean, if you look at Donovan, again, if you look at the guys that are no longer here, you're 4, 5, 6 guys.
Yeah, you're Gobert, Royce, Trent Forrest, Eric Paschall, and Hernan Gomez. I mean, those are guys who were all, some were key contributors, obviously, others were role players, but all of them were in the locker room on a daily basis, coming to the office together. So that's why I say, like, I think that we had a couple comments earlier in the show about, hey, like, are they done? Is it a rebuild or a retool? Well, right now it's a rebuild. Well, I'm telling you it's a retool because there's no way that you can just sit here where you are. Yeah. You don't just make the Rudy trade to just sit here. There are more trades coming, and that's why I say definitively it is a retool.
And I want to go back to James Knight's comment. I only see Don leaving unless it's by his own doing based around lifestyle. Again, I think Donovan Mitchell likes wearing the note. I think he likes being a Utah Jazz man. I do think culturally and politically he's uncomfortable in Utah, as he should be. I mean, I think that's a real talking point. I mean, you look at what's going on in the world, and Utah's a different place to be. I mean, this is a New York kid that spends a lot of time in Connecticut and New York and Miami and Louisville we've seen the last few days. And I just think that there is a place for Donovan Mitchell in Utah. And I think he'd like to win here. Yeah. I do. I think Donovan Mitchell is a guy that's okay going to Louisville. I really do. I think he's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Spencer Morgan on fire today, Spence. He says, I don't think I've ever said Donovan would hang with the Jazz through a rebuild. I don't think he would. Yeah, I don't think he would either.
But again, I just got to keep emphasizing this. Not that I'm saying that I disagree with you, certainly on any level, but I just think if you look at this logically, they're not going to trade Donovan Mitchell, because if that was going to happen, they would have traded him before they traded Rudy.
Yeah, because I think you get far more value for Don than you would have for Rudy.
Yeah,
I don't see a thing where they're trading both of them. I just,
that's the other thing that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I guess
I don't think so.
The only way it makes sense is if Danny Ainge was brought in here to tear it down and rebuild the team, which I don't think he was. Again, what has Ryan Smith said repeatedly? Not that he said much, but what has he said when he's spoken? He has said, hey, our goal is to win a championship, and I care a lot about the LHM legacy that they built, and in carrying that in good earnest and improving it and leaving this organization better than I found it. And I think that part of that process is not doing the 5, 7, 10-year suckfest rebuild that is a lot of these organizations in the league. I mean, how pissed would you be as a Jazz fan if they were bad for 7 seasons, man? If you were a playoff team for the next 2 out of 7 seasons, that wouldn't be acceptable. The Utah Jazz can't do what the Houston Rockets have done or what the Magic did or what Oklahoma City's doing. That's not an option. And so that's why I say everyone's sitting here, the guys in Phoenix or in Brooklyn or whatever are all sitting here saying, oh, well, they're trading Donovan and this and this. If you live here and you follow this team, it does not make sense that they would trade Donovan on like any level. It just doesn't compute.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I mean, if you listen to what Ryan Smith has said, Ryan Smith, though, I also think, by the way, Ryan Smith, for those of you not in Utah, is the owner of the Utah Jazz. And I think Ryan Smith has gone through kind of an evolution as an owner. I mean, I think part of buying a team, which he did 2 years ago as a young billionaire, is learning. And Ryan Smith made a lot of mistakes. I mean, whether it's the uniforms, I'm not trading Joe Ingles, whatever it might be. Ryan Smith has made a lot of mistakes. Hiring Danny Ainge was not one of them.
Yeah.
That was a really good move. And I think Ryan Smith also is learning, hey, man, I know what I don't know. And Danny Ainge is a guy that's done what I'm trying to do, so let me give him basketball operations. Let me make him my CEO. Let me have Danny Ainge go out. And as one of the commenters said last week, it's wild to see Danny Ainge operating unlike the Utah Jazz have ever operated.
Yeah.
And that's what Jake and I have talked so much about, because we're used to the NBA operating the way the NBA operates.
No emotions, numbers, like situations.
Jazz fans are so used to being tied to Karl Malone, John Stockton, Karl Malone, Eaton, all these
Joe
names
Ingles.
And these historic guys. And Joe Ingles. And hey, emotionally, I bought his jersey because he's got this great accent. And listen, I get that. But do you want the great accent or do you want the shiny trophy?
Right.
Because you don't get both generally. And trust me when I say this. And again, if you don't know me, my resume is I've covered this league for 30 years. I watched the Chicago Bulls win in a big way. I followed Phil Jackson to Los Angeles and watched him build a behemoth for the Lakers. Trust me when I tell you, this is how championships are won.
Y'all feel me?
Championships are not won currently in this league by drafting talent and waiting 5 years and hoping. Championships are not won by sitting Jared Butler on the bench and developing him into a starting point guard and waiting for him. Championships are won by cutting out the worst part of your roster, by getting your financial house in order and adding a player who can come in and help you get closer, not further from a championship, regardless of what the fan base thinks. And I think one of the hardest things for Jazz fans to understand is you just don't matter when it comes to trades. And that's how you want it. You need to embrace that, because when you have owners that are involved who care about the bottom line instead of caring about wins and losses, that's when you struggle and you suffer.
Yes.
And when you're worried about what fans think, ultimately it leads to losses, not wins. And I think that's what Danny Ainge is acutely aware of. He's not here to win a popularity contest. He's here to win an NBA championship. And to me, that's how you win rings. You have to be unemotional. I think unemotional is the exact right way to say it.
Yeah.
Mesh says, I love Ayton move. My only concern with all these moves is we're making the Wolves better in Phoenix if they end up with KD, two teams in the West. Would we be better than either? Well, I also think that when you trade for a guy like Kevin Durant, your window becomes very small. And I look at Phoenix in particular, Mesh, because I think this is a really good point. I think Phoenix becomes instantly the number one in the NBA. I think when you put Book, CP3, and let's assume that that's how this trade would end up, that you would have a core of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Chris Paul, right? If those three are together on the Phoenix Suns, they're winning a championship, in my opinion. The question is, what about the Utah Jazz? Well, where do they go with that against that little team, the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah.
Who are set up to win multiple championships for the next 3 years.
Yep.
Let's not worry about the Suns. I'd be more focused on Golden State. I'd be more focused on Denver, who I think got a hell of a lot better. I'd be more focused on just about everybody. By the way, Memphis is another year older. They're going to be better. The West is not getting easier. It's getting more difficult.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz are a better team today than they have been at any time in the last 2 years.
And I think success over the next couple of years is getting to the Western Conference Finals.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that's why I agree with you. Like, I don't think that if you're a Jazz fan, you shouldn't be worried about the Suns. Like, yeah, you're going to play the Suns, obviously, and those we'll love those matchups and everything. But as far as the postseason is concerned, you're not going to see them unless you get to the Western Conference Finals, because they're probably going to be a 1 or a 2 seed. And depending on how it all plays out, like again, if they make the Ayton deal, they kind of finish shaping up this roster, I would assume that the Jazz could contend for a 5 or a 6 seed, So if that's the case, you wouldn't even see the Suns until the Western Conference Finals. And if you got to the Western Conference Finals, you've improved. That was a successful season. So yeah. I just think that it's a win-win for the Jazz to do the Ayton deal and to take that next step forward, even if you do run into the Suns. Yeah,
and I want to go back to James Knight's comments. Joe Ingles' contribution to the Jazz is a little more significant than emotional fan favorite. Just saying. Well, until he deteriorated rapidly last year and then ultimately wound up with a torn knee ligament, yeah, I would agree with you. I think Joe Ingles how do I say this gently? Joe Ingles' value was his ability to make catch and shoot threes. He stopped doing that. He was no longer a defensive stopper. Those were his two highest, best uses on the floor. Off the floor, obviously, he was a glue guy. He was a leader.
Yeah.
He was a chemistry guy. He was somebody that could quell the loud voices in the room. That's what you missed from him. The issue was Joe Ingles was never going to be the guy that was going to win you a championship. He is a piece of a team that wins a championship. There's no doubt about that. Why did he go to Milwaukee? Because he wants a best shot at winning a ring.
Yep.
And he's earned that. And right now, that's not going to be in Utah. Even though, again, I think that this team is far better off today than at any point in the last 2 years. I think you are closer, and I know that sounds crazy, but the Utah Jazz today are closer to winning a championship than they've been at any point in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's because their financial house is far more in order. Their roster is going to be far more in order. It's going to be way more balanced, and you're going to be built around a prototypical NBA superstar instead of a guy that can't score.
Yeah.
And yet is taking 23% of your cap.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say on the Joe Ingles front, and this kind of goes back to the emotional thing we were just talking about, like, I think for, Utah Jazz fans, like James Knight, who have clearly been watching the team for a really long time, like, you saw young Joe Ingles and the contributions and everything he was able to do early on in his Utah Jazz days, and you saw the deterioration. And that's why I say, like, it's not that we're saying that Joe Ingles didn't have value to this team, but I do think it's fair to say in a respectful way, hey, he just ran out of steam, man. That's why the ACL happened. You put that many minutes on a body, on a knee, like injuries happen, man. That's just part of life as a basketball player. So I just think that you can't be emotional about these guys who have been around for a long time. Like, you just need to say, hey, yeah, it's time.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging the contributions that Joe Ingles made to this team.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kurt, good morning to you. Kurt Valenti says, but does Donovan want to stay in Utah? Let's be real. Utah's not a contender at all with what they got, even Ayton. I totally disagree. I think let's have the conversation Utah's not a contender when we know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt that this is far from a finished product. This roster is – you have no idea what this roster is going to look like in a month.
Yeah.
You have no idea what this roster is going to look like in 24 hours. I mean, to me, that you're a little jump in the gun here when you say that, this roster is not a contender. And by the way, the other thing I think is important is that we stop talking about if Donovan wants to be here, because he is here. And until he demands a trade, he's here.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people that are sure that he wants out of Utah. He's done nothing to display that. And I can only say this so many times. Donovan Mitchell has done nothing to say, I want out of Utah. I hate playing in Utah. I don't want to be here. I love this idea that Donovan Mitchell is greedy and he's selfish and he wants to go to the Knicks to win a championship.
Yeah.
If you're greedy and selfish, are you demanding a trade to the Knicks? Because you're not winning a championship in New York in the next 5 years at this moment. You're not. You're closer to a championship in Utah than you are in a Knick uniform.
Agreed.
Right? So this idea that Donovan Mitchell is forcing his way out. Like,
congratulations, but that's bullshit.
You have no evidence of that. You have no evidence. And again, I can only tell you what people at the Jazz have told us. He's never, not once, not before, not currently, nothing. Donovan Mitchell's never demanded a trade from the Jazz. Never. He has never once said, I want out. What Donovan Mitchell has said, and we've been repeatedly able to confirm, I want to win a championship, and I want to do that as soon as possible.
That's every day.
He has told the Jazz, I'm not willing to sit here and go through you ripping this team down to the studs, because everybody keeps saying that. Donovan Mitchell has said, I don't want to be here with 4 other rookies on the floor. That's essentially what he said. The Rudy Gobert trade tells you that that's not what this team's doing, that they are committed to putting the assets and the money forward that they need to make sure that this team's competitive for a championship. And I'm telling you, if this next week to 10 days goes off the way I think it's going to, there's no reason this team can't win 3 rings in the next 5 years. And I think that starts next year. I don't think if Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, and I think he will, you're not going to compete with Phoenix or Golden State. You're not. The question is, what does Golden State do? Because I think that's huge. You're not going to be able to keep Clay and Wiggs, in my opinion. You're going to wind up trading one of the two. And if I had to guess right now today, I would still say they're going to trade Clay. But that's just my opinion. I think you're going to see over the next year that Golden State's going to change. Phoenix is going to change. Memphis is going to keep growing. Denver's going to keep growing. The Jazz are going to keep growing. And there's no reason to believe that Danny Ainge is going to falter or that he's not going to put this team in a very good position to win. So I think we need to stop with this assumption that Donovan doesn't want to be here, because there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting me fired up, Kurt. I appreciate that. By the way, D's World of Hoops says agree 100%, Kurt. Kurt also says Golden State, the Suns, Memphis, Denver, Minnesota, the Lakers, Dallas, easily all better. The LA Lakers are not better than half of the league right now.
Yeah.
They're not. Listen.
Talk about a prove it deal.
The Suns right now are a bit dysfunctional. Without Deandre Ayton, they're going to have trouble scoring because he was a huge part of their offense. When a guy gives you 20 points a game, you don't just trade that guy away and think that Devin Booker is going to pick up and average 46 points a game, because he's not. Right? So, again, I think everything's in evolution. Everything's changing and evolving and growing. Let's see what the Suns are. Let's see what happens in Golden State. It's very difficult to play the volume of games that Golden State just played 3 years in a row. I think we've seen that. Why do you rarely see repeat champions anymore? Because you have the Euros, and you have the Olympics, and you have the Olympic qualifying, and you have the finals, and all the best players playing all those games. Like Luka Doncic. Big question about Luka right now. Luka's playing in Europe right now. He's playing in the Euros right now. And when that tournament kicks off in August, watch how many NBA superstars are in that tournament. Rudy Gobert's going to be in that tournament. You look at Luka Doncic is going to be in that tournament. Those guys are all putting mileage on the tires, man. Yep. And again, what have we said about Rudy Gobert? He's played in the Olympic qualifiers. He's played in the Olympic tournament. He's played in the playoffs. Now he's going to go play in the Euros.
Yep.
Some point, the wall's coming. And it's just a matter of how hard you hit the wall.
I.e. Joe Ingles.
I.e. Kobe Bryant. I.e. LeBron James.
Kevin Durant.
All these guys, eventually it catches up. You can't play all this basketball and think everything's going to be great.
Yep.
And I look at guys like Klay Thompson. I look at guys like Steph Curry. I look at LeBron James. I look at Donovan Mitchell. I look at all these guys who play all this basketball. Eventually, Father Time is going to win because he's undefeated.
Yep.
So all of this stuff, you got to go through this. I look at the Phoenix Suns are a perfect example of this. Kevin Durant has a recent history of missing significant time with injury. Chris Paul has a recent history of missing significant time with injury. Why did we tell you that Mike Conley was a massive mistake when you extended him? Because he has a recent history and a career-long history of missing significant time. You can't continue to pay guys and hitch your wagon to dudes that miss consistent amounts of playing time.
This is a code 10 abort.
Why did Klay Thompson struggle so much in the playoffs? Because he was tired.
Yeah.
Because all he's done for 2 years is rehab. Right? So now I would expect this coming year, Klay Thompson to be Klay Thompson again. Right? But look at Draymond Green. Draymond Green doesn't look like the same player he once was, does he? Because he's getting old. And I look at guys like Draymond Green, those are the glue guys. That's the reason that they're as good as they are.
Well, and I think when we talk about limiting factors, that will hold Golden State back on some level, like all the basketball they've played. And I think that, again, this is why I say, if the Jazz can get this right, they have a shot. And I don't think, again, respectfully, I just don't think it's fair to be writing them off already. Right now, as it sits today, yeah, all those teams are better than the Utah Jazz. But I just have to keep saying this, they're not done. They're clearly not done. It's not even in question.
Yep, I agree. Mr. East says Ayton and Anunoby in Utah would put the Jazz in a completely different path. Stronger team, and the Jazz can get them now. I don't know that you're going to be able to pry OG Anunoby away from Toronto for anything less than a superstar. I mean, I think Toronto really wanted Rudy Gobert. I think there is, and I know we talked about this ad nauseum, but Gary Trent and OG Anunoby, that package they were going to get from Toronto is not half of what they got from Minnesota.
Seriously.
I mean, the uproar and the Jazz fans that are upset about what the Jazz got from Minnesota, I just don't know what trade you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because with all due respect to Rudy's prowess at the rim, I mean, they absolutely got a haul. I mean, just in Kessler and Vanderbilt and those picks alone.
Yeah, Beverly.
I mean, and you look at, I think they're going to flip Pat Bev. That's just my opinion. But I look at, if you keep Malik Beasley on this team, you're fine. That's a guy who can start for you at the 3 or the 4. You know, like if Malik Beasley and Bojan Bogdanovic are on the floor together, Bojan's a better player.
Yeah.
And again, I'd love to see Bojan stay on this team. I don't know that that's going to happen. He's got value around the league.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Bojan be on this team. I'd love to see, frankly, if you can keep Vanderbilt, Beasley, and Bojan as 3 guys on this roster, you're in really good shape. Malik Beasley can play. That dude can play.
But I don't think a lot of people know that because he was in Minnesota. Like, how many times did you watch Malik Beasley last year?
Yeah, we watched a lot of Timberwolves. I have no life. My wife's probably got like 3 gigolo boyfriends because I just spend so much time watching
All
basketball.
gas, no break.
And my wife hates basketball. She is not a huge basketball fan,
Texas me.
especially NBA. But anyway, let's get a couple other comments in here because there's one I want to talk to specifically. M. Alvarez says, hey, when you're winding down today, can I get 2 cents on the Utah Utes meeting with the Big 12 today? This is a huge story.
Yeah.
This is a huge story because, frankly, my weakest relationships are at the University of Utah. But it's interesting that the folks I know at BYU, they're pretty convinced that Utah is going to make a deal today to join the Big 12. Like, they are pretty convinced.
That would be fire.
They are convinced that Washington and Oregon are going to the Pac, or from the Pac-12 to the Big 10. And there's a lot of people who believe that Utah and Colorado are going to the Big 12 today.
I want the Holy War. I want it.
I want it every year. And if BYU and Utah wind up in the Big 12, how is Utah not instantly favored to be the Big 12 champion?
I want it.
That would be a killer addition.
Yes.
I don't happen to be a big fan of what they do in Boulder. That's just me. I hate Colorado, with all due respect. But my God, if you're the Big 12, how do you say no to that? I know the Big 12 wants the Arizona schools. I totally understand that. But right now, Colorado's in better shape than Arizona State. I think your mom's in better shape than Arizona State. But I got to tell you, Arizona's on the rise. What Fish has done down there and the recruiting, I don't know how many, you probably aren't paying attention. Arizona's not in bad shape. Arizona, since the Rich Rod, my kids are quarterback days, Arizona's gotten markedly better since they hired him as coach. And I'm telling you, Arizona's another one that belongs in the Big 12.
I just think for Utah, like, you are in a position where you got to maximize the time you have left with Kyle Whittingham, and I think that getting the Holy War back on the calendar every single year and just why wouldn't you? Like, my biggest thing here is this is the price the Pac-12 pays for being incredibly subpar the last 10 years. So,
the funny thing is, though, we sat in our vaunted pre-show meeting last night trying to figure out if we could talk football today, and we just haven't had time because there's been so much NBA.
Yeah.
But this Utah Big 12 thing is real.
Yeah, I like football, I like football season and all the things that go with it.
When you're here in BYU, and from what I understand, the Big 12 is vetting Utah heavily. The Big 12 would love to add Utah.
I'm sure.
And my guess is that that's going to happen because my friends in Provo are all asking, hey, like they're all being asked by the Big 12 conference, hey, do you guys want to do this? And the funny thing is, the Big 12 is asking BYU about Utah. And the irony of how much more leverage BYU has in college football today than Utah does.
Yeah.
The gutting of the Pac-12 has absolutely given rise to BYU's independence. And the decision that Tom Holmoe and the leadership at BYU made all those years ago to be independent absolutely looks like they did the right thing.
Yeah.
Because the one thing you can say about Utah, before we get back to the NBA real quick, and then we got to get to Sean Watson, and then we got to move. But anyway, the point is, there's 2 things you can't deny about the Pac-12. It cost you a ton of money. You lost money going to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. At the time, you didn't think that would happen. But at the end, you lost money and you lost Q factor, rating factor. You lost TV deals.
Facts.
You lost third-tier rights, social media, video.
You lost the talent on the football field because the Pac-12 is bad at footballing.
I agree. Larry Scott absolutely gutted the programs in that conference.
Yeah.
And as stunning as it was last week that UCLA and USC were able to turn that thing around in days, I think Utah's got to act quickly here. And I think A.D. Harlan is a guy that is going to do that. And he has, from what I understand, Mark Harlan has full ability to do whatever he thinks is right for Utah athletics.
Yeah.
He has the full backing of leadership at Utah. And I think they are going to meet today, and I think they are going to try and consummate a deal. They are going to plant the seed in your mom's garden, and they are going to germinate. And
drop that mother.
there's going to be a sweet new baby Ute in the Big 12. That was probably too far. See, what I meant to say, the copulation of contracts and,
What now? Let me tell you what now.
you know,
Sorry,
Okay.
did you say copulation?
of contracts and
look here, man.
the constipation
And stuff.
and stuff. Okay.
Correct the mundo.
You know,
Yeah. All right.
let's get back to basketball.
Right.
Jeremy Bolton bringing in Ayton would be very reminiscent of good old Jazz days of Raul Lopez and Jaron. Did you just say Raul? Not Raul. Raul Lopez. Did you really just say that?
Bro,
You really? And
on.
Jaron Collins. You've mentioned Jaron Collins like 5 times in the last 3 shows. Settle down. Settle down. Jeremy, I have a vision of you wearing your Alex Caruso jersey right now. Your shoulders are very white. Jordan Nelson says Toronto thinks Anunoby is something way better than he actually is. I would love to have OG Anunoby on my team. That cat can play on the wing. Absolutely.